Hello everyone, this video is going to be about changing the rack and pinion steering on a Land Cruiser 100 or LX470. It'll be in real time, so I'll be videoing as we're doing it. Biggest thing you need to know is you'll be changing or losing oil, coolant, and power steering fluid during this, obviously. We changed all the lines and the pump as well.
There are two bolts here, one here, one on the other side. You can't see in the video. This bolt. There's a high pressure line down here and a return line here that go on the top of the steering box there. Remove two lines, the steering input, 4 bolts, and then the return line over here. And we'll be able to get it out. Now we're going to replace the power steering pump too, which is located up there. That pulley, but we'll get to that. First, we're going to get this rack out. We're going to break our tie rods off. So we think the hardest part's probably going to be those lines up there. All right, so this steering shaft is a 12mm bolt. We used a swivel and came down here. There's probably 10 other ways you can do this, but this is how we're getting to it.
We took the bolts loose both at the rack and up by the steering column closest to the firewall, just to give us a little bit more play. We drained the power steering fluid from the return line that goes into the rack.
It's tight. Good gosh.
There it went. That's what it took.
So you have to remove the oil filter housing.
Get it out.
The rack will not come out, so the interference there without doing that. So we're going to attempt to remove everything to do that.
I reference this as the oil filter housing periodically. It's the oil filter cooler and oil filter housing.
All right, it'll be hard to see this, but we're laying under the car. There's the CV axle. So that bolt right there. And it just fell out in my hand. Came out of that hole right there. 12mm. That's the first one we can identify on the oil filter housing. There's supposed to be 4, we think. I'm not sure I get enough light to see it or not, but it's to the right of where the socket is right now. In order to get on the bolt we're on right now with the wrench, we had to take this line loose, and it creates a mess. We got probably a gallon of coolant out of it, which we're wearing right now, but now we're going to try to break this next one loose. The nut we took off, have your hand just a second, way up there. So that one nut, 2 bolts, there's a hose going in here, that'll focus. There's a hose up there, cooling line, so you'll get lots of coolant. Now we're just trying to figure out how to wiggle it out, because it's loose, but it hasn't come off yet. So we gotta work on that. So the reason the filter housing won't come out is because of these 2 lines right here. Right there and right there. They're miserable to get to. You can see my arm goes behind the CV axle into the K-member, and it's a 12mm wrench. Now, I broke it loose with a hose wrench. Now I'm using a regular wrench to very slowly and painfully get it off. So this one's loose here. I'm doing the one on the top now that the camera just won't focus on. But it's a miserably slow mess here. We're getting through it though. Those are those 2 lines to the back, in front of the differential, behind the K-member, up on the actual rack still. Because the oil filter housing won't come out unless the rack comes out. The rack won't come out unless the oil filter housing comes out. And these lines are blocking the oil filter housing, so we're kind of disassembling it. We did get the housing out after we took those 2 lines off. We had to push the rack forward to get it off the stud. The stud is really hard to see. There, just beyond the wire. Yeah, Wish I could get a good camera angle on it, but that's just how hard it is to get to. It's all the way up there. You see it right there. You gotta get it all the way off, so we had to push the rack forward and over just enough to clear it and then roll it out of here. We've removed all the lines except this one. We still can't get it out. We got the oil filter housing out. So, because that line is hurting us vertically, we're trying to get it off. It's a 17mm wrench, and the threads go all the way to China. And if you're in China, they all go all the way to the United States. But we think once we get this out, we'll be able to, there we go.
Well,
That was not staged. We've already worked on this a few times. All right, we'll try to get it out now. Input shaft hitting the compressor. Oop. Just scrubbed it a little bit. All right, so after we got that line off, which may or may not have gone off, but we shifted the rack all the way to the passenger side, and we're pretty sure we can just pull it out now. But remember, when you shift it, you're going to get oil spewing out here. So you're going to be dealing with power steering fluid, oil, and coolant doing this job. And don't be shy, because there's a mess. All right, so we try to record at the same time we take it out.
can. Let me just jump in here. If you want to record, I'll ease it through here. There we go.
All right, she's out.
There it is.
All right. Look at that. Now ours was leaking out here pretty bad. On this side, we were changing the power steering fluid at the same time we were filming it. So, to review, we got oil filter housing with the lines that had come off the rack from here down to here and here in order to clear everything. Then that could come off. Then we shifted the rack all the way to the passenger side, and then we were able to fish the rack out. But just notice all the lines are off. Now we got to install, we might try it with the lines, but we'll see, because these will be miserably difficult to put on. Those are the ones I did earlier in the video that were deep in there above the CV axle. So how many tools does it take? All of them. So, but 12 and 14 and 17mm are most of your friends, but we'll put a list of tools out somewhere. Happy working. All right, so it's a remanufactured rack because they don't have a new one. Got a new power steering pump, new pressure and return lines, and they do come with this sensor in case I try to tell you it doesn't, but these are very expensive. We're going to use the same pulley because there's nothing wrong with it. We needed one new tie rod in because we busted the boot on this one, and it is worn, but not terrible. Where's that O-ring at? So this was the hard part to get because they forgot to order it. We got it at a different dealership. There's the O-ring that goes on the back of the oil pump. There were some other message posts that said that if you don't replace it, you're probably going to get a leak. So the $2 part is all we needed back there. So when we took it out, we had to take these two lines off. We're going to attempt to put it back in with them on there, because I know starting these two lines, if you remember from the other video, how deep you had to reach to get them out. They're going to be a real pain to start. So we'll give that a try. That's the parts. These are all the tools we used. Roll it.
Easy on the hoses. Alright. 30. Back to sets in that 9.
Yep.
Okay. Now.
Alright, so our next piece to put in is this oil filter mount housing. This is a new gasket. It was about $2 from Toyota. You can get it from O'Reilly's or Advance Auto also. Now this one is a Toyota number if you're into that. And we put some grease down inside of the channel so it would stick and not fall out on us. We cleaned up the mounting surface. We cleaned up where the hose connections go, where the oil filter goes, so that we have nice clean surfaces for the hose and the filter. We're going to attempt to fish this thing back up in there and get these bolts started. There's one nut and 2 bolts on the mounting surface. See a little bit better here, but that oil filter housing mounts up here. There are 2 bolts on the bottom and 1 stud that's really hard to see right there. I'm trying to get the light and my phone camera out of the way. But you put it in right there. This is the oil filter sending unit wire. It needs to go around the oil filter housing and back to the unit on the back side. We'll get to that. That's not hard. But fishing this thing up in here, bolting it in place with the rack in here, which is how it has to go. It has to come out. The rack has to be shifted around. That's the challenging part. On the removal, we had to take these 2 lines off. We're going to try to leave them in here and see if we can get it in. If not, we'll suffer through that too. All right, the next bolt we're getting to is up there. It's a stud. It's actually a nut at the very top here where the swivel socket's going. You'll see it better right here. Okay, we're underneath the truck here. There's the CV axle at the top of the camera. You can see I got a swivel socket. That's a 12 millimeter on the bolt going in the back. This one's not terrible to have to get in or out, but does require some extensions and some sockets. So I'm just going to run it down now.
The oil filter pressure sender shown here, the wire routing is shown. It was a little difficult to fish back through if you don't fish it properly when you install the housing to begin with.
All right, so these are the new pressure and return lines. You may not have replaced yours, but you got to tighten them up here. We passed a wrench through the side here, like this, to tighten the one up on the return at the top. We just use a regular wrench and a hose wrench at the end when we could fit it, then another longer wrench. And this is the pressure line a little bit closer. And we put a new, it's a banjo bolt, but it doesn't have the traditional copper washer. It's this little plated part. It's actually pretty neat from Toyota. Looks like, the old one looks like this. But now we're putting the banjo bolt back in. It's a 17 millimeter socket also. So both of these are 17 millimeters. Pretty tight. All right, so here is the bolt that goes in the input shaft, input to the strap. Get some light on at the same time showing in the video. It's right here. So when you're doing this, you got to make sure not. So there you go, a good view of that bolt. You don't want to turn the steering wheel while this is off. You'll mess up the clock spring. So here we just sort of slid the shaft back on. We'd split it and everything else when we were taking it off, so it actually went on quite easily, but we shifted the rack around to get it on. It was really not that bad. Now we're putting this bolt in here. And we got 2 more to put in at the top of the steering shaft also that we'd taken out so that we had a little bit of play. We had somebody sit in the car and hold the steering wheel while we moved it around down here and got it on. But you can see that bolt. I just can't put my hand up there because it's holding the flashlight. Alright, next step is bolting the rack in place. There's this piece here. This is a new urethane bushing. It goes over here. And we have these through bolts just like we took them off. So, you know, sometimes putting that bushing on is a pain in the butt, but it is split. See it there. It goes on like that. So the split's towards the front. Probably doesn't really matter, but that's just how it came off. Okay, so I'm going to put this screwdriver in here to shift the thing forward to try to get this lined up. It's not as easy as it looks. Everybody, there we go. That wasn't easier than it should have. Where is... Alright, that was starting pretty good. The back one. Alright, I'm sliding it over where the boot is, and then I'm sliding it down like that. So I slid it over the boot on the side of the rack, and then in a position after that. right? Walk around, it doesn't wear it out.
All right, there it
That
is.
is. That's too easy to get cross threaded. Okay, we got those bolts on. This is a return line. This is not a Toyota return line. This is just standard power steering hose, 5/8 inch ID. This is the Toyota return line that came in the kit. Now we'll put the high pressure line on right here. Alright, so we got this tightened. We're going to hold it right here some to tighten it. We're not even sure it's tight enough because this metal piece is against that housing. We got these two on the switch that goes up into the air box. So if we're not tight enough, we'll find a way to tighten it more, but we won't know until we start it up.
I mentioned the fact that if you break them off, what the cost of that is.
Oh yeah, if you break these off, these little plastic tabs at the back where the sensor is, that piece is about $180. Just that little sensor there. The kit of lines cost about $400 from Toyota, and it comes with this piece from Toyota, so there's part of the cost. I'm trying to bleed by going left to right and left to right. We've probably done it 50 times now to get all the air out, but we're still getting air here. We started it once, but it whined too much, so.
Same thing, just hold it for about 10 seconds and go back.
The banjo bolt up in there leaking a little bit without the engine running, so we tightened it up. And we're trying to figure those things out right now. Alright, so here is the banjo bolt we're talking about. You can see it right there. I've tightened it up 3 times now to get it to stop leaking, but it's I don't know the exact torque value on it, but it's pretty tight. More than I'd be comfortable doing on a banjo bolt, but I think we've got it licked because the system is bled. It's not making any whining noises. We've hit the bump stops a couple times just to see where it builds the most amount of pressure, and it's not leaking.